Thanks for that, Rich. Yes, we are now at the stage of the tournament where it's all about 60-card decks. The 40-card decks, they can be put to one side for now because it's all about constructed and our players are ready in the feature match area. I'm Tim Willoughby with R&D member Ian Duke, and we're getting a chance to see exactly how these guys round it out as we go toward the top 8 here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Hello and welcome to this round 12 here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. We're back in constructed, it's standard, and we have a lot of great players in our feature match area. There is the rematch, I guess, between Matt Nass and Shota Yasuoka going on. Matt, the first person to take a game, indeed a match win off Shota. But we're not going to be starting there. We're going to be beginning with a couple of different decks. First up, we've got Shi Tian from Hong Kong. He is playing almost red-white vehicles. There's a little bit of a splash in there for black for unlicensed disintegration, but a very, very aggressive deck indeed. And on the other side of things, Kentaro Yamamoto of Japan, there we see him. He's got a very interesting build indeed that's working off a lot of graveyard synergies in.
Yeah, that's right, Tim. And Yamamoto's deck in particular is actually very unique. I haven't seen any other lists exactly like his. We have seen quite a few prized amalgam type decks in the tournament here this weekend, but Kentaro's is very, very unique in that he's actually very heavy into milling himself with 4 copies of Perpetual Timepiece. So a very, very graveyard-centric deck and more about milling rather than discarding.
But he has to be a little bit worried because Toolcraft Exemplar into Scrap Heap Scrounger represents a very, very aggressive start. And while Cathartic Reunion, a lovely way of getting cards into the graveyard, it does mean that he's not putting any creatures onto the battlefield, so he's going to be taking a fair few hits here in the early turns of the game. You can see Yamamoto's hand there. He's got a few choices in terms of what he wants to put in the graveyard. Some cards far better in there than others. Haunted Dead, one of the hallmark cards that lets you bring things back, and indeed Advanced Stitchwing. For now, though, Scrap Heap Scrounger going to the graveyard, that's another one that's easy to get back from there. So it's almost like the graveyard is a second hand for Yamamoto, and that's something you're going to be seeing throughout this match, that Yamamoto keeps his graveyard kind of spread out so he can see everything that's in there because it's still a set of relevant cards for him.
That's right, and the main interaction of his deck is returning prized amalgam from his graveyard to the battlefield by returning other creatures from his graveyard to the battlefield, like Scrap Heap Scrounger and Advanced Stitchwing. But in the meantime, Kentaro under a lot of pressure here from Shi Tian's aggressive start with his red-white artifact and vehicle-based deck.
Now, we've titled Kentaro Yamamoto's deck Grixis Emerge. The reason for that is the likes of Wretched Griff and Elder Deep Fiend that currently sit in his hand, because he's got creatures that he can continually return from the graveyard to play. The Emerge cost of having to sacrifice a creature really doesn't feel like so much of a cost. Yamamoto, if he can start to get his engine going, has a lot going on. As things stand, for now though, taking big hits, Inventor's Apprentice joining Shi Tian's side of the board as a 1-mana 2/3. It kind of feels to me like Red's had a little bit of a push with Kaladesh. It wasn't something that we saw classic red aggro decks so much in the previous metagame. Was that a conscious decision to mix things up a little bit?
It was absolutely, Tim. During Battle for Zendikar and Shadow's block, we were actually kind of taking a step back from hyper-aggressive red because those hyper-aggressive red decks were really, really strong and successful around the time of Dragons of Tarkir and Magic Origins. So we kind of took a breather from the super all-in aggressive decks and explored some other kind of more interesting red design space with cards like Chandra Flamecaller and Goblin Dark Dwellers and so on and so on. Now that we're back in Kaladesh, you know, we actually kind of restored red's identity as the hyper-aggressive color using things like artifacts and vehicles to bolster its aggressiveness.
Yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense that when you go and visit Chandra's hometown that there's going to be a few good red cards knocking around.
That's right.
So Yamamoto here still yet to really get a whole lot going. He's got Tormenting Voices to work with. He's got a Lightning Axe to kill off something. But in the meantime, he's going to have to worry about all these threats coming from Shi Tian. Scrap Heap Scrounger, one of the kind of splash cards that we see in many of these red-white lists because it's a creature that just doesn't go away. Once it's been killed off once, you can potentially pay a bit of mana, exile another creature from your graveyard and get it back. And that really does facilitate these very aggressive starts. So attacks coming from Shi Tian here. There we can see the Scrap Heap Scrounger. That's 3 points of damage coming through just on its own, and with Toolcraft Exemplar representing the same amount, this prompts a bit of action from Yamamoto. Chooses to use Lightning Axe on the Toolcraft Exemplar, and it does, of course, get another card into Yamamoto's graveyard. Wretched Griff, not quite the card that you want to get in your graveyard that way. You'd much rather sacrifice it from play. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do, and Inventor's Apprentice joining Shi Tian's side of the board, still threatening lethal on this very, very aggressive start. Now, you might think that this would be the fastest game one that we're likely to see, given how quickly Shi Tian was able to deploy those threats. He does take the first game, but in point of fact, Rich Hone was able to just pip him to the post in terms of getting a game win, picking up first game against Makis Matsoukas. He's on Team Aetherworks, so the way that he did it, quite different to what Shi Tian's got going on. We're going to get a chance to see some more Magic soon enough, but before that, these messages.
Put what you've learned from watching the Pro Tour into action next weekend at Game Day. Test your skills and your new standard deck at a store near you. Top finishers are awarded special Game Day prizes, including full art premium promo cards and a champion playmat for the winner. Kaladesh is now available on Magic Duels. Build endless deck combinations with more than 1,000 unique cards. Play through hours of story with 50 campaign missions. Play Magic Duels free today on Xbox One, Steam, iPad, and iPhone.
Hello and welcome back to this round 12 at Pro Tour Kaladesh. We've already seen a little bit of our main match between Shi Tian and Kentaro Yamamoto, but in Duke we got plenty more great matches in this feature match area, and we're going to get a chance to see a rematch from the very last round. Players can't play against each other in the same format more than once, but Matt Nass, he beats Shota Yasuoka just last round in draft. Now we're in constructed. It's a whole different ballgame. We have a Grixis control deck from Shota Yasuoka and one of the breakout decks of the tournament in Matt Nass's hands, that being this Aetherworks Marvel deck.
Yeah, and as we enter this board state here, it looks like Shota Yasuoka is casting an end-of-turn Torrential Gearhulk to anticipate, get a little card selection here. And Matt Nass, not with much of a board here. We see no Aetherworks Marvel on the battlefield for Matt Nass, only a Glint Nest Crane as far as board presence goes. So things looking pretty good here for Shota Yasuoka.
Yeah, the very first Aetherworks Marvel that was cast by Matt Nass was hit by Negate. If you can stop the Aetherworks Marvel itself coming down, that obviously the ideal, because while the cards cast off Aetherworks Marvel are cast, if those cards are Eldrazi, you're still getting the effect of their cast triggers.
Now, one of the things Shota is going to have to look out for, given the state of the game here, is Matt Nass gradually climbing his way up and being able to actually hard cast an Eldrazi from his hand. Emrakul being the more likely of the two. We do see 7 lands on the battlefield for Matt Nass, and a bit of Delirium in the graveyard. So potentially getting closer to an Emrakul, but...
Yeah, we're hearing there are 4 different card types in the graveyard, so it's not that far off. But with the 2 copies of Thing in the Ice in play for Shota Yasuoka, there's the potential for him to mount some fairly sizable attacks relatively soon. Torrential Gearhulk already able to get stuck in here. And the synergy between Thing in the Ice and Torrential Gearhulk, not one to sneeze at, because actually, you know what? Bouncing your own Torrential Gearhulk's pretty good in this deck.
It is, and more so than that, Thing in the Ice just provides really good insurance against an Emrakul. You know, even if Shota doesn't readily have an answer to the Emrakul, if he can just cast a couple of instants the turn that Emrakul comes down and send her back to Matt Nass's hand, that can open the window for Shota to win the game before Emrakul comes down a second time. Just one of the many utility functions that Thing in the Ice has. I've been really impressed with it so far here this weekend.
So Matt Nass here, he's in dig, dig, dig mode. The Glassblowers Puzzle Knot does an awful lot for this deck, trying to find the cards that you need to be able to go off, but also generating energy in the process. And this is exactly the kind of Matt Nass deck that Matt Nass is best suited to playing. He's long stated that he's got a preference for playing combo decks, but in his opponent, Shota Yasuoka, he's found someone who also has a very strong preference, and that strong preference is for control. Here comes Emrakul. Void Chatter is the answer, and that one will be good enough to make sure that Emrakul herself is exiled. There's still the cast trigger to worry about, though. So Matt Nass will be controlling Shota Yasuoka's turn here. Let's see what he can do. So we have Awoken Horror transformed already. There's a thing in the Ice on 2 counters. And then in hand, Anticipate, Torrential Gearhulk, Negate, Ceremonious Rejection, and another copy of Torrential Gearhulk. Matt Nass does have to worry about the fact that Shota Yasuoka is going to be the next person to take a turn here.
And these Emrakul turns really tough to think through from both players' perspective. Although, Tim, I'm not seeing too many ways for Matt Nass to really devastate Shota's board here.
Yeah, the fact that there's 2 copies of Torrential Gearhulk kind of important because, yes, he could cast a Torrential Gearhulk, then Ceremonious Rejection it, just to get a couple of cards out of Shota Yasuoka's hand, but there's still another Torrential Gearhulk. There's still a lot of threats in this hand. And casting too many instants, potentially a bit of a problem also, because Matt certainly does not want to have to deal with 2 copies of Awoken Horror here. Starts things off with Anticipate.
Looks like a miss, as it were, from Anticipate, showing only 3 lands there. I think Matt Nass was hoping to find something that could wreak more havoc on Shota's board.
Yeah, chooses to take the Evolving Wilds and he activates it. Now, I'm guessing what's going to happen here is he's going to have a good old look through Shota's deck. And the only reason that he would actually put a land into play here would be if he had something clever to do with it. But given it comes into play tapped, I'm not sure that that's really going to be the case.
Yeah,
Well,
it looks to me extremely unlikely that Matt Nass is going to win this game from this point. He may just be taking advantage of the opportunity to get the information and look through Shota's deck. You know, Shota's deck, of course, having lots of low numbers of copies of different cards, having an idea of what's in his arsenal, very helpful. And indeed, Matt Nass does decide that he doesn't have the tools to pull out of that and is going to pack him up.
Not very often that you see the turn where you win the game while your opponent is controlling your turn, but Shota Yasuoka succeeding in that venture, and we get a chance to jump back to our main match, that one being between Hong Kong native Shi Tian and Kentaro Yamamoto of Japan, this time Yamamoto on the play. Toolcraft Exemplar again, kind of the first play of the game, just a cracking of that Evolving Wilds for Yamamoto, fetching a mountain. The Exemplar, pretty regularly a 3-2 attacker for the Vehicles deck. There's plenty of artifacts in there, and actually the likes of Thraben Inspector, one of the more powerful cards in the deck because it represents a creature to crew a vehicle and a source of artifacts for this deck. Just a quick update from one of our other matches. Micron is playing Steve Rubin on one of our back tables, and Rubin has taken the first game. 2 former Pro Tour winners there going head-to-head late in the day here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Cathartic Reunion offering Kentaro Yamamoto a way of discarding a couple of pretty important cards. Getting copies of Prized Amalgam into the graveyard is one of the kind of key things that this deck is looking to do, because every time he gets any creature back from the graveyard, that Prized Amalgam comes back pretty much for free.
That's right, Tim, and that's a big difference between Kentaro's draw this game versus last game. Last game, he did a lot of kind of sifting and card selection type things, but wasn't actually able to get his graveyard synergies online in time. Now, between being on the play and being able to get a Prized Amalgam into the graveyard already on turn 2, things are looking a lot better for Kentaro Yamamoto this game.
Well, no artifact for Shi Tian on turn 2, meaning that he wasn't able to get in for any more than one. Instead, he got a Veteran Motorist, and the Motorist Scry 2 does mean that draws for Shi Tian in subsequent turns should be just a little bit better. You can see there that the actual issue that he's got going on is that he doesn't have much more in the way of mana and did have to use a point of energy just to be able to cast the Motorist there. So kind of hoping to find a land pretty shortly, I would guess. Scrap Heap Scrounger means that this is an attack for 6 coming in for Shi Tian. I mean, this red-white deck, I mean, I call it red-white because that's kind of most of the colors that it's got going on most of the time. It is very, very aggressive indeed, and what that does is it puts a huge amount of pressure on opponents. If they have any kind of a stumble in their draw, suddenly they're looking on the wrong side of a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's definitely true, Tim. It has been a couple standard seasons since we've had a very low-to-the-ground aggressive deck. You know, we saw a little bit of this with, like, the Boss Humans decks, you know, in past standard seasons, but, you know, that was kind of just a relatively small part of the metagame. But, yeah, it hasn't really been, again, as I was saying earlier, since, you know, kind of Magic Origins was the newest set, that we had these very, very hyper-aggressive decks with lots and lots of one-drops, you know, excluding that Humans deck.
That was around the time that Team Eureka, as is now known, really came to prominence. You had Martin Dang and Joel Larson both winning Pro Tours with red decks. This time around, the red deck is working with a few more colors.
And certainly giving this standard format a much different character from last season, which was, you know, much more in the mid-range and ramp type of space.
Now, Kozilek's return in hand for Kentaro Yamamoto is going to make a big difference to this board. There we see it. Instant speed, 2 damage to all creatures, and there are plenty of ways to make sure that it then triggers from the graveyard as well. So there's a second chance at clearing the board for Kentaro Yamamoto, and that a great draw for him, with Shi Tian functionally kind of stuck down, not far off just one land really, that Ether Hub only tapping for colorless mana here. This is a much, much better game for Kentaro Yamamoto, in spite of the fact that, yes, he is down on life. Particularly sort of painful for Shi Tian here is he has 2 copies of Cultivator's Caravan in hand. He cannot cast either of them. As soon as he gets to them, all of his mana woes are pretty much concluded. Now, Kentaro Yamamoto simply passing the turn without making a play here doesn't necessarily mean that he's in terrible shape. His is a deck that does have some fairly cool things that it can be doing at instant speed. Right now, the main thing is that he can hold up Lightning Axe to kill something off and get another prized amalgam into that graveyard.
Yeah, he also has a copy of Advanced Stitchwing, I believe, in his graveyard there. And being able to bring that back. Yep, looks like he is doing this. Allows him to discard the prized amalgam as part of the cost, and then the prized amalgam will actually see the result of the effect, bringing back that Stitchwing, and comes back itself. So he gets not 1 but 2 prized amalgams back at the end of Shi Tian's turn.
Now, it's worth, if any of you are looking to pick up this sort of deck, having a careful look at the timing when it comes to things with prized amalgam. It triggers to come back at the beginning of the next end step. So Kentaro Yamamoto, rather than the traditional do such and such at end of turn that we see from many decks, may well have said, at the end of your second main phase, I'm going to make this play so that I get to get my prized amalgams back just a turn sooner. Big swings from Yamamoto here. The life totals were 20 to 10. Now we see them be much, much closer. 11 to 10 now after those attacks. And Lee, with lots of cards in hand, desperately looking for more lands. Another update, Rich Hoenn against Makis Matsoukas. That one is going to be going to a Game 3. The Timur Aetherworks deck for Rich Hoenn not quite able to achieve what it did in Game 1 there. But another copy of Kozilek's Return being played from hand here, again clearing a path for Yamamoto. His creatures all big enough to survive the big sweeper. Meanwhile, the same cannot be said for the creatures available to Shi Tian. A decisive play for Yamamoto as he tries to push for a Game 3. Harness Lightning enough to deal with at least one of those prized amalgams for now, but it's kind of painful when you have to use removal like that on a creature that you know is going to be coming right back. 5 life means that even just on the board, Shi Tian in a lot of trouble here, and not too much for Yamamoto to do in order to close this game out. Tormenting Voice puts another copy of Prized Amalgam in the graveyard, draws a few more cards for Kentaro Yamamoto, and this deck's really seen a little bit of a turbocharge thanks to the addition of Cathartic Reunion, with Elder Deep Fiend able to make sure there's enough damage, and that's enough to force game 3 between these two great players. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more of the grudge match that's gradually formed between Matt Nass and Shota Yasuoka. Of course, Matt was the first person to take a match off Shota Yasuoka. Now they're playing again, this time round in Constructed, and it's Control versus Etherworks Marvel. Last game, Matt Nass not really able to piece together everything he needed in the face of the counter magic of Yasuoka. Let's see whether or not after sideboarding much changes there.
So there's a glimmer of genius for Shota Yasuoka at the end of the turn. And what's beautiful about Shota's deck is it plays almost exclusively at instant speed, and it has a lot of counter magic, especially post-sideboard. So being able to leave that up against the Etherworks Marvel deck is just, you know, a tremendous, tremendous thing. And if honestly, Tim, if Etherworks Marvel is the breakout deck of this format, then Shota's deck is kind of like the next level beyond it. I'm really impressed with how Shota has metagamed and prepared for this field here.
I mean, his preparation is interesting compared to the way that many people prepare for tournaments. He's a big theory crafter. He tends to work on his own, looks at formats, analyzes what's going on, and then builds the best control deck he can. And the Japanese coverage team were telling me with a little bit of a wry smile that there's two things that are noteworthy about this deck. The first one is it got built on Thursday night, right before the Pro Tour, and while normally Shota loves to have beautiful Guru basic lands, you can see there the islands and the swamps, he wasn't anticipating playing red before he came to Hawaii, so he doesn't have a Guru Mountain with him, which he feels a little bit sad about. The other thing is, they're a little concerned, you know what's going to happen when everybody copies this deck, tries to play it, and just can't play it at quite the same level that Shota does, because he truly is a master of control. Anticipate here after a glimmer of genius. Oh, I'm just hearing from our spotter on the floor, Marshall Sutcliffe, that Matt Nass's draw is not ideal. He has seen 6 of his 8 Eldrazi between what's in his hand and what's in his graveyard. And now we see that Shota Yasuoka is going to get the memo of what's going on, as Transgress the Mind means that he gets to see, yes, there's a Ceremonious Rejection, yes, there's an Etherworks Marvel, yes, we have counter magic, but look at all of those Eldrazi, and with just 4 land, they are not going to get cast anytime soon.
I like how Matt just kind of plopped them down as the surprise at the end. And I have 4 of these.
And you heard the laugh there from Shota Yasuoka as well. He knows that he's now in great position. His is not necessarily a sort of deck that's going to close out games super quickly, but it's amazing how once it does turn a corner, it can get things going with Torrential Gearhulk, Wandering Fumarole on occasion, and of course Thing in the Ice.
So importantly there, Transgress the Mind stripped away Matt Nass's only copy of Etherworks Marvel that he had in his hand. We also got a glimpse at Matt's hand there containing Dispel, which is an important sideboard card that he's brought in for this matchup. And it's really good for Shota to know about that card because, you know, Shota might leave himself in a situation where he's maybe tapping low to draw some cards or something and only leaves up 1 counterspell. And if Matt Nass is able to go Etherworks Marvel, plus I have Dispel for your counterspell, that's a way that this game could slip away from Shota. So both the ability to take away the Marvel as well as the information gain there was absolutely huge for Shota. And it looks like we see Shota kind of setting up to win the game here over the next couple turns as he adds Thing in the Ice and continues to develop his board.
Yeah, I think we can probably head back to our main match here. It seems like, even though technically speaking, Matt Nass has not succumbed to what Shota Yasuoka's got going on, it's going to take something just far outside the regular realm of possibility for him to be able to come back from exactly the kind of control start that Shota wanted and exactly the kind of awkward draw that Matt was probably hoping to avoid. So a turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar again from Shi Tian. A very powerful play on turn 1 because so much of the time it does represent a 3-point swing on the second turn of the game, and even better on the play, of course. There we see Yamamoto's stats. 32 years of age, already played 24 Pro Tours, and he's had some big finishes within there. Also, he did make the top 4 of the World Championships in Nice and is definitely someone to watch out for on the global stage when it comes to Magic. Just a 1-point swing there from Toolcraft Exemplar, but Veteran Motorist means that a scry for 2 and solid draws for Shi Tian for the next turn after he can just tweak a little bit about what's on the top of his deck. I kind of like where Yamamoto's hand sits here, actually. He's already got Cathartic Reunion to get cards in the graveyard, Kozilek's Return in order to clean the battlefield a little bit. Elder Deep Fiend at some point will become relevant, but Prized Amalgam going in the graveyard is kind of where this deck wants to be.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tim. Looks like he's well equipped to do what his deck is trying to do. Now, keep in mind, he is on the draw here against Shi Tian's super aggressive deck, which matters a lot. And couple important notes here coming up. So Shi Tian has just resolved a Cultivator's Caravan. We see Kentaro taking a look at that. And the reason this card's really important to Shi Tian's deck is we've described his deck as Mardu Vehicles, but he's actually splashing not just black, but also blue. So he's a 4-color vehicles deck that's base red, white. And what he gets access to from the blue is Ceremonious Rejection out of the sideboard, which I presume is fantastic against the Aetherworks Marvel deck, but also works against the colorless Eldrazi, of which Kentaro Yamamoto's deck is playing lots of.
The other thing that's going to work fairly well for Shi Tian with the Caravan here is if Kozilek's Return comes along, which there's every reason to think that it may, this is a creature that's not going to die. I mean, at the moment, it's not even a creature, but it's not going to take too much for Shi Tian to find a way of crewing. A Toolcraft Exemplar would be enough to make sure that the Caravan can roll on in. And that means that it's a different caliber of threat for Shi Tian in terms of keeping things going.
So Yamamoto does go for Kozilek's Return, and there's the Ceremonious Rejection off of the freshly played Cultivator's Caravan, a huge tempo play for Shi Tian, and that could end up deciding the game.
Yeah, worth noting that Kozilek's Return, in spite of the red mana in the corner, it is a colorless spell, and as such, can be ceremoniously rejected. Big old swings here, because basically the perfect creature to crew a Cultivator's Caravan. Another Veteran Motorist gives it gives it +1/+1 to attack for 6 in total.
So huge attack there from Shi Tian for 12 points, knocking Kentaro Yamamoto down to 1, and I cannot see a way out of this for Kentaro Yamamoto. He just has so much work to do in terms of both clearing the board and guarding against that Cultivator's Caravan.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to have a bit of trouble for Kentaro Yamamoto here, because even if he deals with all of those creatures in play, somehow getting his Kozilek's Return going again, he still needs to worry about that Cultivator's Caravan. And there's the handshake. Shi Tian advancing to 10-2. He's already got a whole mess of top 8s as Shi Tian, and it looks like he's in great shape to potentially pick up another one.
Yeah, really innovative version of the red-white vehicles deck there. I'd heard a little bit of talk about it throughout the weekend. Hadn't seen it on camera yet, but that was very impressive, being able to go Cultivator's Caravan into Ceremonious Rejection. Just a huge tempo play.
Yeah, and one that there was really very little chance of Yamamoto seeing coming. There are some Spirebluff Canals in Shi Tian's deck, and they perhaps tip things just a little bit more, but in that instance, I think you would have to have had some kind of a soul read if you were going to figure out exactly what was going on there. But we're going to get a chance to jump across and see one of our other matches here. We're going to our back table where we have Makis Matsoukas of Greece up against Canadian player Rich Hohen. 31 years of age, but has played a huge amount of Pro Tours and is really known for his success in Limited, though I would suggest that that's possibly a little bit unfair these days. He has had a pretty spectacular set of runs, even in more regulation play later on. I mean, he just missed top 8 a couple of years back in Canada, originally from Canada, of course, Rich Hohen. And I think that there's a good chance that if it had just simply worked out, that tiebreakers in the last round had worked out differently, he could have at some point been in serious conversation for Hall of Fame. Now, a very interesting set of additions to the red-white tokens deck of Makis Matsoukas here. Just cast Thalia, and that means that creatures and non-basic lands are going to come into play tapped for Rich Hohen. In the meantime, he's got plenty of other threats going on. Thalia, Heretic Cathar there you see. Toolcraft Exemplar, Thraben Inspector coming down. There's Smuggler's Copter in play. It has already been enchanted, so it's not going to be able to attack for too much. But so many permanents on the board for Makis Matsoukas that it's very powerful.
That's right, Tim. I mean, even if Rich is able to play Aetherworks Marvel and get into a big Eldrazi like Ulamog or Emrakul, because of the presence of Thalia, the Eldrazi would enter tapped, at least in the case of Emrakul it would. So the only ways I can see Rich getting out of this is if he does have a copy of Kozilek's Return to his graveyard, which I can't see from here with the graveyard being a little bit off the screen. But in any case, here we go with the Aetherworks Marvel. We'll just kind of let this unfold and see what happens.
Spins the wheel. It does not look immediately like we have a big scary Eldrazi. There's already one in hand for Rich Hohen here, and I believe that this could be the death knell here for Hohen. He picked up game one very quickly against Makis Matsoukas, but Matsoukas was able to square things up one game apiece. And right now, he really does need to dig deep if he's going to find a way of dealing with all of the threats on the other side of the battlefield. We barely even mentioned Gideon. So many different bits and pieces coming from the aggressive red-white deck from Makis Matsoukas. PNLR can pump things. We've got Gideon that can do all sorts of different bits and pieces. Up to 6 loyalty here from Gideon.
Looks like PNLR making that Glint Nest Crane unable to block. Big attack coming in here from Makis.
Yeah, very, very tough situation here for Rich Hohen. A lot to deal with and not very much in order to do so.
It looks like a lethal attack, and yes, indeed, players shake hands.
Congratulations to Makis Matsoukas, advancing to 11-1. Fantastic performance from the Greek player there, taking down a big name who is really making a run himself at getting yet another top 8 fight. So just the one match left going on in our feature match area. We're going to get a chance to jump across and see 2 more former Pro Tour winners. Mike Krohn, best known for his limited play, has certainly had some great performances over the years with 40-card decks. Now he is playing a 60-card deck, and the one that he's gone with is Mardu Vehicles against Black-Red Aggro from Steve Rubin. What does it say about our format that the aggro decks are the last ones playing in the feature match area? Scrap Heap Scrounger and a Thopter token up against, that looks to be a Fleet Wheel Cruiser there from Mike Krohn. On 8 life, gets to cast his veteran motorist there. Scrying 2. Krohn still with a Harness Lightning in hand. That will be able to deal with one of the creatures on the other side of the board. Steve Rubin's deck, very able to get stuck in aggressively. Not quite so powerful when it comes to defense. Scrap Heap Scrounger, of course, can't block whatsoever. So this kind of an old-fashioned race, and if you're decked with vehicles, then you've got to feel like you're all right if you need to be racing. There we see Krohn. Krohn was the winner of Pro Tour Geneva back in Time Spiral draft. Getting stuck in here with a crewed up vehicle that's now a 6/4 trampler. Galvanic Bombardment in hand, not good enough to deal with that one, so Steve simply untapping, and he's going to be rumbling back. Unlicensed Disintegration, a gigantic draw for him, though, because that one, he does have an artifact in play. It basically is murder with 3 points of damage thrown on top, and in a tight damage race, that represents a big, big swing.
Yeah, indeed, a very, very powerful card, and one of the main reasons to play a deck like Steve Rubin's Black-Red Aggro here. Things, yeah, although both players low on life, things are looking pretty good for Steve here with the double removal spell in his hand. Of course, we don't have a great look right now at what is in Mike Krohn's hand, but, you know, I'm seeing here Steve Rubin potential attack for 4, and then Galvanic Bombardment potentially to take out the Veteran Motorist and an Unlicensed Disintegration, even if Mike has another way to crew up that Fleet Wheel Cruiser.
Yeah, Harness Lightning, the only card in Mike Krohn's hand. He does have the mana to cast it, so this attack may not go quite as well as Steve Rubin would ideally hope. But the good thing about Scrap Heap Scrounger is it's not very difficult to make sure that even if it gets killed off, that it comes right on back. And there are more creatures in the graveyard for Steve Rubin. Smuggler's Copter does not count as a creature in the graveyard, but PNLR, she can do one last parting good deed for that Scrap Heap Scrounger. So what are we going to see here from Steve Rubin? First up, the attack. Now we get to see some removal.
So there is indeed the galvanic bombardment on the veteran motorist. That leaves Micron temporarily unable to crew the Fleet Wheel Cruiser.
Has drawn a Toolcraft Exemplar for the turn, and once we get to combat, that Toolcraft Exemplar jumps up to 3 power, and that enough to crew most of the vehicles that people are playing in Standard right now.
That's right. There's also a copy of Needle Spires on the battlefield for Micron.
Yeah, the double strike from Needle Spires, in principle, means that he can be looking at this and thinking, have I got lethal? Can it be? He certainly can't afford to get busy on blocks here, so this may be the point where we see Micron pull the trigger here. After a little bit of thought, it looks like, yep, first off we're tapping 4. That signals that Needle Spires is going to be getting stuck in. 2-1 double strike, so representing 4 damage. Here comes Toolcraft Exemplar. So if there was nothing from Steve Rubin, this would be fantastic. Unfortunately, there is something from Steve Rubin, which means it's kind of fantastic, but in the other direction, Steve Rubin able to take that to the 3rd game, and he advances now to 9-3 after round 12. That the last of our feature matches here in the area for round 12. We've seen a good old mix of different decks in the feature match area. I think that there were a lot of people that overnight were thinking, oh my goodness, Aetherworks Marvel just seems to be unbeatable. What can we all do about this? And, well, Shota Yasuoka, he may well have been thinking that a few days ago, but he thought about it hard enough to come to an answer.
He did, and his deck looks very, very well positioned to beat the Marvel decks. And indeed, Tim, I think we saw both of the Marvel decks we had in the feature match area actually lose this round.
Yeah, it's true. And on the other side of things, aggression does seem to be working out. I know that it seemed like it was kind of the level 1 deck for the format almost, that you go, right, let's pile on the pressure with some Toolcraft Exemplars, with some vehicles, maybe a Smuggler's Copter or 2. Just because it's straightforward does not mean it's not powerful, and a number of players doing very well with that indeed. A good old mix of decks, and I'm certainly kind of excited to see what happens in the subsequent rounds. But that is the end of this, our round 12. We will head over to the news desk and Rich Hagan to find out what's been going on the floor.
Thanks very much to Tim Willoughby and Ian Duke. So 1 round almost done. You can see 8 minutes left on the round here, and BDM's going to be out on the floor trying to find out what else is going on around these top tables. Looks to me like Eric Froelich is in trouble. He began 8-0, of course, 3-0 in draft, 5-0 in constructed, then 0-3 this morning, came back to his perfect record standard deck, but I believe Eric has lost his first round this afternoon, so that's 8-4. But someone who's doing fantastically well is Makis Matsoukas of Greece. He is just dominating everything in front of him. It's his first Pro Tour, Magic Online RPTQ to get here, and he is really making the most of it. He's in the feature match area, and conveniently enough with a microphone, so is Brian David Marshall.
Thanks, Rich. But I think I misheard you because you said this is Makis' first Pro Tour, and that can't possibly be. You're doing very well here today. This can't be your first Pro Tour.
It is my first.
So, you go into your first Pro Tour. What are you imagining your experience is going to be like? I mean, you're sitting here at 11-1. This is just unbelievable.
Well, I've played a couple of GPs. Of course, it's not the same. But I thought, to be honest, I didn't expect to be here, 11-1. My goal at first was to make day 2. The first draft went well. I 2-1, and then I didn't lose in constructed, and getting pretty lucky, to be honest. In general, I think I'm pretty lucky to be here.
Okay, so you're on a 9-0 run right now, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
Very, very impressive. Now, how did you prepare for this event? Were you able to latch on to one of the super teams, or were you able to, work with any of the big European alliances?
Well, I'm not a household name or anything.
Yet.
Okay, I won't comment on that. But We tested with the guys back home. The Greek community is there aren't many people, but we're pretty closely bonded. They helped me prepare. I'm pretty close with Bill Chronopoulos. You know him.
I do. World Magic Cup national champion.
All the guys from the Greek team that finished second, I guess 3 years ago. And also, I want to thank the guys that in my home store, in my local store, sorry. Nick Epitropakis, George Handrinos, Nick Kaponis, Dimitris Dimakis. I want to thank them because I've been playing for 12 years now. I started as the little kid that opens the broken sealed pool and goes 1-4 in the pre-release to being here. And I think in general, the most important thing about this game is the friendships you make. I guess that's it. For the tournament, I played a lot of drafts, also on Magic Online, and I felt pretty good in Limited. In Constructed, I didn't test much because I was traveling. There was a strike in Greece, and I had to reschedule my flight. It took me 40 hours to get here.
Oh my gosh. Let me ask you a question about the World Magic Cup because you're in a position to put up some pro points pretty early on here in the season. Accumulating pro points is what will get you to the captaincy for your national team. What would it mean for you to be a member of the World Magic Cup, two installments from now?
First of all, I would replace Bill Chronopoulos, and that's the most important thing. No, Bill is a very good friend. I think the World Magic Cup is the greatest, the biggest tournament in Magic, and it would mean I don't know how to say that. I don't know the exact words, but I think it would be even better than a top 8 here.
Wow. Wow, there you hear it from Makis. And if you think, maybe we haven't seen a lot of Bill Chronopoulos since that World Magic Cup run a couple years ago, well, you know what? He's still having an impact at the Pro Tour right now. You see him helping Makis work to put up this incredible run here early in day 2 at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Good job, Makis.
Thank you.
I'm not sure everyone at home fully understands what an amazing place in the hearts and minds of really good Magic players the Magic World Cup has, the World Magic Cup, because if you are from a small community, to be one of 3 or 4 people who get to travel the world and represent your country, it is the pinnacle. You heard him say there, he would trade a top 8 today for being the captain of the Greek World Magic Cup team. That's fantastic. It really is an amazing event. We can't wait to bring it all to you from Rotterdam. And don't forget that a week before the World Magic Cup in Rotterdam, you can play against many of those same national teams at Grand Prix Rotterdam. It's the same format. It's like a test run the week before. So if you've got a couple of friends and can get yourself to the Netherlands, Rotterdam is going to be amazing. Meanwhile, a lot of people are still trying to get into the top 8 of this tournament with 4 and a bit rounds to go. You see a couple of minutes left before we call time. Now, a lot of relatively unfamiliar names are very much in the mix. Jun Ishihara, I think playing in his 7th Pro Tour from Japan, is 10-2. Mark Jacobson from East West Bowl, 9-3. Tyler Hill is 9-3. The Argentinian, Luis Salvato, 9-3. Pierre Dajon of France, he's fallen to 9-3. He's the Pro Tour Theros finalist, of course, behind Jeremy Desani. That's because Rob Pisano has put himself one step closer to the top 8 at 10-2. Greg Orange, 9-2-1. Starting to get to the point where that draw might turn out to be good news for him, or he may run out of rounds. We'll see how that works. Jacob Nagro, 9-3. Adam Seidler of the Czech Republic is up to 9-3. And so is Canada's Michael Goode. Now, that's significant because since he is up to 9-3, that means that the #1 player in the world and player of the year, Owen Turtenwald, is now at 8-4, and by our reckoning, will not win this first Pro Tour of the season. The 4th loss, we do believe, is pretty much fatal for your top 8 chances. So that's some of the scores, still plenty more coming in. But right now, waiting for us, it's time for another Deck Tech. Can't wait for this one. This is a super exciting one. It's all about the control. So here comes Brian David Marshall and Zach Elsick.